Hi, welcome back to How to Write Science Fiction Doesn't Suck. I'm Rick Partlow. No, it's been a while, but honestly, I've been having trouble coming up with new ideas for videos. I've had several suggestions, and some of them I will get to eventually. Not a question of me not wanting to, it's a question of me deciding what I have to say about those subjects. Like I've had several people ask me to do something about the mushy middle, to do a more detailed account of how to fill it up. I did a short video on that, and I'm not 100% certain what else to say about it. So I've been thinking about that. So if you're one of the people who asked me, I will get to that eventually. I just need to, come up with something more intelligent to say. Um, Not that I couldn't blather on unintelligently for hours, but I don't think you'd want to watch that. So today, I want to talk about the opposite of the mushy middle, the ending, the climax, the thing that everybody thinks they don't need help with, which is why I want to talk about it because you do. You do need help with it. Um, Most people, when they start a book, they have the beginning. The beginning is easy to write. They have 10 or 20,000 words in the beginning, and they have an ending in mind. And usually they have it written down. Sometimes they will have the ending actually written, the whole thing, 10,000 words or whatever. They'll have the ending written. And they are working from that beginning to that ending. And I am here to tell you today that although I will not say that, I'll never say never or always, because people can make things work. People have made things work. Stephen King makes a living, like millions of dollars, huge career out of not being able to write an ending because the rest of the book's so good. So I can't tell you what you're doing is going to work, but I will tell you, for me, in general, for most writers, particularly new writers, don't write that ending and think you're aiming at it. You should have an idea of how you want the book to end, like the goal you're aiming at, but it should be like putting in your Google Maps Cleveland, Ohio, rather than Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland, Ohio. Specific ad. You want a general place you want the book to end, and I'll tell you why. As you write the book, you are going to realize that the plot has themes that are running through it. You may not intend. I don't intend these themes to be there at first. I realize they're there pretty quickly, but you're going to have themes in your plot, unless your book is just totally vapid and an excuse for action scenes. You are going to have themes running through your plot. You're also going to have character arcs, and you may know how you may think you know how those character arcs are going to go, but if you have well thought out characters who are alive in your head and come alive for the reader, well then, as those character arcs resolve and as those themes cohere, it's going to aim at a target. And it may not be the target that you had set up at the beginning. It may be that you would set up, okay, this guy's going to make the heroic sacrifice. This guy's going to get killed near the end. This guy is going to be the hero who beats the bad guy, pushes the button or whatever, or pulls the trigger. But it may turn out differently. For instance, I will give you an example from my own work. Drop Trooper 3. There's a scene near the end of the book where a heroic sacrifice has to be made. Somebody has to carry a fusion warhead into a bunker that's occupied by the enemy. And I thought when I started that book that I knew who was going to carry that weapon into the bunker. And yet, as the book went along, it was somebody totally different. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but it was somebody, a very important side character, a an ally, a friend, a teacher of the main character who I didn't really want to kill, but they'd reached the point in their character arc where it was either kill them or get rid of them some other way, like transferring, because they were a crutch for the main character. They were somebody who would come to him when he screwed up and tell him exactly what he did wrong and what he needed to do. And by the third book, I'm at the point where he shouldn't have somebody like that to be a crutch for him. He should be developing into the kind of person who knows these things already, who's learned enough to not need someone to tell him these things, which makes the need for this character obviated. Now, it's not always necessary to kill off a character when their role in a story is over. You can have them leave, you can have them transfer, you can do whatever you want. But when you're writing a series that's a war story and you want to emphasize that anybody can die, well, that's a good, and they're in a situation where their characters as developed as they're going to get, and it's a situation where somebody's got to sacrifice himself. That seems like a good place for that person to die. I know that seems kind of callous, and I love my characters and I don't want to kill them off. But you're in a position when you're writing, especially a military science fiction series or novel, where you can't have a war where nobody on your side dies. That's not going to work. So I had that person killed off, and it hurt. Didn't like doing it, but that's the way that the book needed to end. Which brings us to something else that new writers frequently try to do. They want to subvert their reader expectations. That is also not a good idea. Let me tell you why. You're writing probably in a genre or subgenre where there's been hundreds or thousands of books written, and the people you're writing for usually have read dozens or hundreds of books, and they have an expectation on how certain plots and stories are going to end. If you are writing a military science fiction book with a grizzled NCO who's teaching a young platoon leader how to become an officer, or teaching a young private how to become an NCO and how to be a leader, well, by the end of that book or end of that series, somewhere in the series, that NCO is probably going to die. That's what the audience expects. That's what the readers expect. And if you don't kill the NCO and you treat it like, oh yeah, he's just going to live happily ever after, well, that seems good to you because you love your characters, but the audience is going to be like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right to me. So I mean, you're trying to subvert their expectations, but the expectations are there for a reason. And they may not know why they don't like the ending of your book, but they will know they don't like it. There was a fantasy novel, by a very well-respected writer who I like. I've read his stuff. He's very talented. He's a nice guy. I've met him in real life. I don't want to say like too many details about this because I don't want to call him out or anything. But it was a fantasy novel where there's a young idealistic hero who is making his way up, learning how to become a soldier, warrior, and he goes on this dangerous mission. And in the end, everybody he loves is killed. He is branded a traitor, thrown out of his society, and then the book ends. And I'm like, what the hell? And I read this and I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. Well, as it turns out, I found out later, this was a prequel to a series in that universe. But there was nothing in the book when I bought it that said this is a prequel to another series. There was no indication to me that there was any more coming in this universe. And I read this whole book expecting one ending and got a completely different one. And I was not happy. Maybe that was supposed to subvert my expectations. Well, it didn't subvert them, it gutted them. And I don't know why writers think that subverting audience expectations is going to be a good thing. The only way to subvert expectations is to first fulfill them. And I'll give you an example of that. Walter John Williams, in the book Voice of the Whirlwind, and I'm going to name him because this is a good example, so I'm not calling him out. I'm giving him as a good example. The main character is in a world where people have clone insurance, and you can get a clone made of yourself, and you can store your memories. And if you die, the clone is activated, and your memories are read into it, and you have a young adult version of yourself running around with your memories. So basically, you, like a reincarnated version of you. And in this novel, The Voice of the Whirlwind, the main character is on a collision course with his past, and you really feel the whole book like he's going to die, like this is going to end with him dying. And in the end, it does. But this is the book with the clone insurance, and he has a clone ready to go, and it takes up his life, and he's going to live a different life and be a new person now. So it kind of gave you a happy ending, but it also fulfilled your expectation that was set up by the book that the main character was on a collision course with death. So it did both. He fulfilled audience expectations and he subverted them. That's, if you plan on subverting expectations, you would better learn how to fulfill them first. I gave you one example. Talk about that grizzled NCO example. Pardon me. Say that you're in that position where it makes sense for him to die, and you put him in the battle. He makes the sacrifice. Things go black, and then he wakes up, and he's been wounded pretty badly, and the war is over, and he is not dead, but because of what happened, his life is starting anew. He's not going to be a soldier anymore or a Marine. He's going to be forced to confront civilian life. And maybe that's one of the themes through the book, that for him, civilian life was the equivalent to death. So you are fulfilling your audience expectations and subverting them at the same time. That's just one example, but if you plan to subvert expectations, my advice, strong advice, like I don't give advice this strong lightly, fulfill their expectations before you have tried to subvert them. That is an important thing for an ending. I feel like people don't put enough thought into their endings, and this is one of those areas where you have to understand that whether you intend to or not, you're setting up your audience's expectations. You need to be aware of the themes and tropes and characters that you are using and where all that heads to. You need to be aware of the natural destination rather than the artificial destination you set up. Okay, so that's one thing. If you're going to subvert expectations, you have to fulfill them first. Also, as noted, be aware that your original idea for how a book is going to end may not be where the themes and character arcs that you have set up lead to. So follow the natural path of your book. Do not be afraid to change your outline, to change your ending. Don't be attached to the original ending you wrote, because it might be that you need to switch. Honestly, that's one big piece of advice I have for you right now is don't be that attached to anything you wrote. Don't be afraid to change anything. Now, if you already have an established series with established characters, don't change them at that point because people are wanting to read them. But if you're writing book one with new characters, don't be afraid to change anything if it makes it better, because book one is your one chance to hook your readers. Your stable of readers are going to be brought in by book one. And with every book that comes, you're going to lose a few of them. So you need to attract as many people as possible to book one. That's getting into marketing a bit. But in general, and also if you're doing it for trad publishing, book one is what's going to get you a book two. If the editor in chief doesn't like book one, they're not going to publish it. If they like book one, but it doesn't sell, you're not going to get a book two. Okay, so that's point number 3. Let's go to point number 4, which is have a real ending. This is more of a thing for series. People who are writing series. There's a tendency, especially among indie writers, when writing series, to make everything a cliffhanger and to not resolve anything in one book and just drag it out into as many books as possible to get people to read. And maybe it works for some people for marketing purposes, but I don't like it. I think it's a cheat. I don't think it's fair to your readers. I think if you're going to have a long series, you need to have some unresolved questions that are asked that you resolve later on, and some unresolved character arcs. But I think that every book should have a natural ending. There should be a middle, beginning, and an end, beginning, a middle, and an end for each book in the series. And there should be character arcs to get resolved and plot arcs to get resolved. And maybe there's a couple that go on to the next book, but don't make every book a cliffhanger. Don't make every book more questions that you don't answer. You need to answer questions and bring up new ones. I'll give you a bad example of this, the TV show Lost. They would say, oh, we answered the questions. We told you what the numbers were because you had to put them into this thing to keep. No, that's not the questions people wanted answered. People wanted the why of it, not, oh, this is what the numbers are for. You put them in to keep the thing from blowing up. Well, why is it going to blow up? What's the deal? It took them a long time to answer those questions, and then once they did, the answers were not satisfying because they'd blown them up they had built them up too much, and then you find out the real answer, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. And most of the questions they never really did answer. What was the smoke monster? Oh, it was this other guy. He turned into the smoke monster. How? Who is he? How did they turn in? Who are they? Gods? Are they aliens? You never know. They don't answer the questions, and so that's how you don't end a series. But in my opinion, you need to have a character arc that at least gets you. Say you have a character whose arc in the first book is he fears commitment. Well, by the end of the first book, he should commit to something. He may not be ready to commit to everything, but he should commit to something. Say that it's a guy who's a soldier, is a private, and he joined the military to run away from like a girl he didn't want to marry, or business he didn't want to run, or something like that. He's afraid to commit to anything, but now he's in the war, and by the end of the book, he should commit to something. He should commit to, you know, being the best soldier he can be. Something he needs to have committed. He may not commit to everything, and that may be a continuing character arc, him committing to more things. But by the end of the book, he should find that commitment is not as bad as he thought. Um, if you're writing a book about somebody who is struggling with fear, who is inexperienced and is afraid and doesn't know what they're doing, well, by the end of the book, they should improve. They should do something heroic. They should overcome their fear. And you may continue that arc throughout the series, but you need to come to a natural conclusion in that book and not cheat the reader. I also don't like cliffhangers. I mean, you can have a minor cliffhanger, but in my opinion, ending a book where you don't know if the main character is dead or alive is kind of lazy. There's ways to make the end of the book have tension without doing that. And I know marketing angles, it works sometimes, people buy the next book and that's great, but I think it's lazy. I think it's cheap and lazy. Maybe you disagree. You're free to do it your own way. This is just my opinion. Okay. So don't cheat your readers just because you're writing a series. Don't cheat the end of the book. The end of the book should be a resolution of character arcs, an answer to questions. It should be, the classic trilogy. First book is a victory that's not the final victory, but it's a major victory. Second book, they should have a setback, and at the end of the book, things are looking dark, and they manage to escape, but things are looking dark. The whole Empire Strikes Back deal, and then the third book is the final victory. Well, that's a trilogy. I mean, the ideal for indie fiction writing is to have a longer series than that, but that's your classic trilogy. In my opinion, trilogies are a good way to have story arcs. If you're writing a longer series, you can have 3 books, then another arc of 3 books, another arc of 3 books. So it's still the same deal. It's still a trilogy. Drop Trooper, I got kind of screwed up with that because originally I was going to have the war be three books long, but I realized it would be more naturally 4. So, and when it continued after the war was over, I was stuck in 4-book arcs. So it's not really natural for me. I would rather have done 3-book arcs, but I did 4. So I think that's about all that I wanted to go over. Don't be stuck on an ending, on a climax before you write the book. Have a general idea where you want to go, but don't be afraid to change it. Follow the characters, follow the character arcs, follow the thematic progression of the book, and that will get you to a point where the ending feels natural to your readers and to you. Don't cheat the readers. Don't try to have a cliffhanger that doesn't resolve anything. And don't subvert your readers' expectations without first fulfilling them. I think that's going to be it for today. I could ramble on for a little longer, but this is basically what I had to say. Endings are the most important part of the book. I mean, the beginning is important too, because you're getting people to read the rest of the book. But the ending is where they're either going to say, this is a really good ending and make it one of their favorite books, or they're going to throw it across the room, unless it's on their Kindle, in which case they'll just delete it and curse you. So be careful of your endings. Treat them like the fragile treasure they are, and make sure that you don't half-ass your ending. Make it worth the ride to get to, because you get to the ending and you're like, oh, this has been a fun ride, but that ending's a letdown. People aren't going to remember your book. They're not going to want to read the rest of your books. All right, I will talk at you all later. Bye.